It took a while, but following the episode Hyde, I was back to being genuinely excited, anticipating the next episodes of Who. The fan appeal of this episode is in the very title, as not since the Tom Baker era have we really explored the depth of the TARDIS. Odd, really, that in a show with a dimensionally transcendental ship, all we've seen in the new series are the console room, a couple of glimpses of wardrobe, some staircases and corridors. The enormity of the TARDIS is boasted but never really demonstrated. Now they have this massive interlinking set. Expect to see more of it in future episodes. Journeys to the Centre of the TARDIS is written by Stephen Thompson, who'd hitherto written for Doctor Who on the pirate romp Curse of the Black Spot. A rather pedestrian episode, not terribly popular among fans. Last time around, the brief was to write the cheerful episode. This time, Moffat was inspired by the 70s serial The Invasion of Time, and asked Thompson to write something like that. Only now they have a budget, and half the BBC isn't on strike. So, will this be the second week in a row when a past writer of a mediocre episode redeems himself? Unfortunately, I have to say, initially I found this episode somewhat disappointing. The first half is alive with energy as the Doctor traps the invading salvage squad on board and activates the self-destruct to get them to help him find Clara, who is lost somewhere in the TARDIS. When they still seem reluctant, he halves the countdown from 1 hour to half an hour. That is pure Doctor. He is prepared to risk everyone and everything for Clara, including himself and Clara. He's the good guy, but also mental. Sadly, halfway through it is revealed that the self-destruct was a bluff and the TARDIS doesn't have one. This annoyed me hugely, seemed utterly unnecessary, and ruined the episode for me. On the second viewing, however, I did enjoy this episode. Not quite the romp I was expecting, rather complicated and at times haunting. My only remaining gripe is that if the Doctor's name is such a big secret he doesn't even want it to be said aloud, almost like the sound itself is dangerous, why is there a book, The History of the Time War, on display as the pride and joy of his book collection, slap bang in the middle of his library, where any companion of the new series could have found it, which names him? That said, Clara seems to flick serendipitously to the right page, as if somehow destined to find out. On that note, if you're wondering where I stand on the issue of the Doctor's name, I am against revealing it, but as usual there are conflicting reports on whether this will actually happen, and Moffat has contradicted himself. Protests in the street? Really? Well, I may decide to stop watching Doctor Who after the 50th anniversary special if the name is actually revealed. I don't know. That Moffat knows the Doctor's name, something writers do, and to have a character in your head. But to have the arrogance to change the series when Doctor Who is something bigger than any one writer, I think that would be shameful, and no one will ever be able to undo it. Even if there is a reboot one day, say Doctor Who Begins, people will be thinking of the character as Blick-o-Lectos Bamble, if that is what Moffat decided to call him. So anyway, the Crimson Horror suits its title, a dark Victorian horror mystery with plenty of mood, intrigue and quite a few jumps. The fact that once again we have symbiotic parasites doesn't matter, it was done well. That it resonated the great intelligence business from earlier in the season, who cares? It was done so much better, and Dame Diana Rigg wasn't nearly as wasted as Richard E. Grant or Celia Imrie. This is Mark Gatiss' best episode since the Dickens episode, The Unquiet Dead. He does Victorian well. But what makes this episode good, like any sci-fi fantasy, is when you can actually believe what you're following. That it gets lumbered with Astra, the lizard detective, and her cockney wife, and comedy Sontaran. I'm not saying the scenes aren't funny, it's just besides the point. Makes you ask, what the hell am I watching? I did enjoy this. I got my hit of Doctor Who. But what could have been a truly great 45 minutes of television is still really just very enjoyable tosh. That a Sontaran can just drive a hansom cab through Victorian Yorkshire? And what exactly is the point of dressing him in a suit that matches the period, with a head like that? A man who faints whenever he sees something weird, nonetheless chooses to hire a talking lizard in a dress as his detective. Vastra wears a veil to hide that she isn't human when A. you can see through it anyway, and it makes almost no difference. And B, she keeps having to lift it anyway in order to look at things, something a detective has to do quite often, making this something of an occupational hazard. Some people think Vastra, Jenny and Strax should have their own spin-off series, as Moffat had wanted. I agree, they should, to keep them out of Doctor Who. Although there wasn't as much Clara this time, it was interesting to see the 21st century version of her don Victorian garb and share an episode with people who knew the 19th century version and saw her die. And the ending where Clara is found out by the children she looks after, that was a pretty good scene, and one of the things that makes me look forward to next week.